No, no.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. We'll start the board meeting for May 18, 2023. Appreciate everybody's attendance. Let's do a quick summary of who's here.
Sure. So I've got President Goldman in attendance. I've got Jay Snodgrass representing Kanawha County. I have Mr. Tolliver and Ms. Adams here representing the city of Charleston. I've got Ms. Fout from Bell. I have David White from Montgomery. And I have Bob Sutphin from St. Albans and Mayor Casebolt from Nitro joining us electronically. We have 6 of 8 partners present, therefore we have a quorum.
Great. And who else?
I'm here as well.
Bobby's present.
And Bobby's present here, so electronically. Thank you, Bobby.
You're welcome.
So the meeting minutes were sent out in the board packet. Hope you've had a chance to take a look at those. There was a couple small revisions that Kurt took care of for me. Any other comments or revisions that need to be made? Is there a motion for approval of the minutes from last meeting?
Motion for approval, yeah.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Scott, we're ready for financial statements.
In your all's packet there, if you want to take a look at Schedule 2, that statement of revenues and expenses. For the month of April, total operating revenues was $245,467. And total operating expenses, $1,169,848. See a little better there at 10-month Schedule 3, the comparative analysis. Operating revenues for the current 10-month period was $2,168,461 compared to the previous $1,395,242. You know, most of that increase again we said with the SOAR revenue and then the investment where they switched us on us last year for some reason and it's back we were used to. And then on the operating expenses, currently we had $11,855,112 compared to the previous year's $11,166,077. On Schedule 4 for the 4-week moving totals, you know, revenues stayed pretty steady, 27, 29, 30% increase. Again, SOAR revenues most of that. And on the ridership side, you know, based on those numbers, we're about a 4% decrease numbers. Actual count, we see a little bit later, it's going to be a little bit different. It's up, but again, these are those averages, use a little bit of different statistics, analysis, things for them. On 4B, for the daily fare box, actual amounts for it, 17,000 every period since COVID, been at 17,000. Steady, but again, when you look at average before that, about $25,000, and we again not coming close to that.
That just dawned on me, is that really 15 to current, so it includes all of these lower months, or is it like 15 to COVID?
It's current, just ran the whole thing with it, yeah.
So if you ran from January 15 to the beginning of COVID, it would be 35,000 or something.
Yep. Actual fare box counts there on 4C for April with everything, we had 89,021 compared to the previous April's 87,510. So it is an increase of 1,511, 1.7%. For D's pass usage, again, day pass 67.6%, and it hasn't changed pretty much at all for the whole fiscal year. Schedule 5, just straight statistical stuff. Average passenger a day, roughly 3,119. Previous April was 3,284. And then for the month, 78,357 compared to 84,841. And then good or bad on Schedule 6 for the excess levy. We're closing in very little activity typically for the months of May and June. May money should all be in, about 255,000 some. So for the year, we're looking at coming in decrease from the previous year, about 2.6%. That is everything. Let's make any questions.
Hey, on 4D, in the middle of that upper chart, rides per day pass sold, it dropped February, March, April quite a bit, and then the average couldn't be right, the 2.716. Not based on that set of numbers.
I've got to look. I think Kurt, this is one of the ones we pulled something from.
Yeah, the formula probably messed up, but I think you're right, it has dropped over the last couple of months.
So what's that attributable to?
I have no clue, to be honest. I can look into it a little bit more.
I just wonder if it's dramatic all of a sudden, the way that dropped off.
Yep.
It's going to be even more dramatic because unfortunately, vendors who usually have to buy the day pass and stuff, it's going to be a couple months. I mean, we got the order in and everything.
Is that because of SOAR? Because do they buy day passes that would come into this?
They totally unaffected with it. They make a call in with it. But again, it's we can still get them on the buses, the day passes, because most people will be able to get on the bus, buy their pass, and they can use it all day. But for some of the organizations and groups, some people do use the online feature where they may have like an event that they take care of. They'll order 5 or 10 day passes through the mail. Those particular cards are the ones that, again, we're doing everything we can to get them here. We've got the order in, we've done everything, but it's still, we're going to run out this week, I think.
We don't have the cards to print to send?
Get the ones on the buses, when people buy one there at the bus, you can do that there, but those activate immediately. But the ones where, there's a lot of groups that do like those cards, and some people where, again, they don't want the cash on the bus, it's getting the change back, they want their change, they'll buy them at the transit or the city center. We have them here and stuff, but, I don't know when, those are gonna be available. I think best case, I would say at least 2 months.
But I mean, all those things you're describing haven't changed. Something changed.
I'm saying, no, I'm just saying that it's gonna get worse because they're not gonna be able to get those tickets, buy them beforehand, but as far as your question, no, it has nothing to do with that at all. No.
I can dig in and do a little research, see what I can find.
Because that number always used to be about 2.65 to 2.69.
Yep.
I mean, it stayed there forever since we instituted the day pass.
Yep.
That's my only questions. Anybody else? Okay, so this will be attached to the meeting minutes for future reference, and we'll go on to item 5, Sean.
Yeah, so we have no invoices in excess of $5,000.
Okay, and then insurance report.
Thank you. We have 2 updates. One was closing out a incident that occurred in 2021, and then there's an additional one on 4/20/2023. A passenger got hurt exiting our vehicle, so they have retained Farmer Pine Chemicals. We'll be dealing with this one for a little while.
Jacob, looks like you're up on CAT.
Not much to report. Pretty much the same as the month before, or months before. I don't know if there's any questions.
Any questions for Scott on CAT operations? And are you doing the COA, Sean?
Yes, yeah, I'm doing that. So, since last month, one of the things, I think Travis is going to throw it up here on the screen, I'm working with Kinley Horn to continue the deep dive into the data on all of our different operations. And a few months ago, Mary Kate gave a presentation to the board, and she talked about our overall numbers as far as our subsidies per route and how they compared with some of our competitors and or partner agencies that are of similar size and scope, etc. So what we asked Mary Kate to do was to dive a little deeper and look at each individual route and what those subsidies are. And so you'll see highlighted in the darker shaded gray here, Mary Kate mentioned anything over $12 would in their opinion, would be excessive as far as being efficient with subsidies in public transit. So you're noticing here that we have several routes that go above, definitely go above $12 when we talk about $33 for Fort Hill, South Hill's $33, Oak Ridge, Works Avenue. Pointing this out as we go through this comprehensive operational analysis, we need to be cognizant of our efficiencies and what makes sense with these routes. And so I appreciate that the board has been so open to some of these concepts. So, I mean, these are things we can control. These are things when we talk about microtransit or opportunities to be more efficient with our funding when it comes to serving these areas. We think we can improve the service to the areas while also decreasing that number in that right column, which is the subsidy per passenger. So, I mean, essentially in South Hills, every time someone gets on a bus, that costs KRT, $33 per person. I can't say that's the most responsible use of taxpayer funding, to be honest with you. So I wanted to display that just to have that conversation starting. This continues to compile together for the final comprehensive operational analysis, and there's going to be suggestions from Kimley Horn on things we can do to improve on those efficiencies. But I wanted to make sure that as we gather that information from our consultants, we share it with the board.
Can you scroll up for a second so I can see the headers of those categories?
Should have logged in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Mhm.
Very good. You also see here the sum of annual ridership. Those first three routes account for almost, what is it, Kurt? Is it 80% of our ridership?
It's around 80%.
Around 80% of our riders ride those three routes. The rest of our 18 routes accomplish 20% more of the ridership. And that's still, those are important routes because obviously they serve some of the outskirts of the county, which is imperative to getting people downtown to work.
Is cost per passenger or per route, is that fuel and everything combined, or is that strictly just riders and mileage?
Yeah, so what it is, it's a calculation of what is our total operating expense per hour. So you take into calculation there the cost of labor, so how much it costs for a driver. You take into account the vehicles that are being driven on that route, what is their fuel efficiency, what is their average cost of maintenance. You look at the depreciation cost of the vehicles, you look at the insurance of the vehicles. You add all those together and that gives you a cost per operating hour, and then you take the revenue hours and divide by the total passengers on that route, and that's what gives you that cost per passenger per route. So it's a combination of all of those expenses. What does it cost KRT to run that per hour divided by how many passengers are on the bus?
So if you added up that column that's annual operating expense, would it sum to our entire budget?
I don't know if it,
Probably not some, but I'm just curious.
yeah, it should go to.
Well, it's
Pretty close, yeah.
Station bus too, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't factor in demand or cap.
Oh, okay, so there's some pieces that aren't included.
Yeah.
So like the South Hills route, is the terrain a large factor in the cost? And it's not like driving the straight roads. It's like-
Sure, so the South Hills route, the routes that we call our hill routes, that's where we drive these 500s is what we call them, these cutaway smaller vehicles. They are slightly more fuel efficient than our big buses, but there's the high cost there is attributed to the amount of hours that we serve that route divided by the smaller amount of individuals that ride it. So if you're operating for 8,000 hours and you only have 2,000 passengers, or sorry, that's backwards. 8,000 passengers and 2,000 hours. That's 4 people an hour ride that bus. That's why that cost gets so dramatically higher.
You think South Hills is basically 4 passengers per hour?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at revenue hours divided by the passengers, so 2,200 revenue hours, 2,300 divided by 81.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's, and I mean, in bringing these up, it's just, let's shine a light on the realities of what this is really costing our system. Because these are, as we get into the budget talks, there's only certain things we can actually control. And some are our levels of service and how we are more efficient with that service.
We went through this exercise. What year was that, Scott? 2014?
Yes, it's been about 10 years, and similar numbers, and we
Yeah,
had to.
I mean, then the glaring one was
Right.
$56 an hour. That was Estelle. And I'm sure we probably had some of these that had 20 and 30 that didn't get any attention then, because we had one at 56.
Right.
Yeah, it's just remembering Kimley Horn and these consultants who do these studies all over the country said that $12 was their threshold that they say something is efficient use of taxpayer funding.
So how can they dig in and see that somebody rides South Hills and then rides one of the mainline routes, and if we lose them on the hill routes,
Yeah.
that they don't ride the?
No, that's a good question, because there's people who, let's say you take the Elkview bus in and then you get on the Nitro bus, right? Because you work in Nitro. That Nitro number is inflated by the individuals who come from Elkview. That's tough for us to do in our current state. As we install more of these APCs, these passenger counters on our bus, we'll be able to see when people get on and where they get off, which will help us make a little bit more accurate reflection of this. But in reality too, though, even if you took away 8,000 passengers from one of those top 3 routes, let's say if South Hills, if every single person in South Hills was riding the St. Albans bus, you'd still be at 220,000. So that's still such a huge percentage that ride that main line.
How many are highlighted in gray?
4, 8.
Okay.
And the
And
mobile,
those- sorry, go ahead.
so the mobile ticketing too will allow, kind of what you mentioned, to track your whole ride.
Because you'll know exactly what
When you
bus
scan
they
your
got
QR
on.
code, yeah, your account, when you go to the account-based system.
You know, tell me when you're going.
And remember that the 4 passengers per hour for South Hills is kind of a misnomer too, because you do have peak time. So you think in
Yeah.
the morning and afternoon or evenings, you may have 8 people ride that bus. But during the day, you could have whole trips that have nobody. And it's just the bus is just going around in circles with no one on it.
And they can dig in and decide that South Hills ought to run like intermittently?
Yeah, I mean,
Could that be a suggestion?
Is it the small bus that runs up there, or is it the big one?
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
small
you've already got a small bus.
It's a small bus, yeah. That's part of what this operational analysis is looking at, is what efficiencies are there? Or is it the length of schedule? Is it the fact that we operate, 21 hours a day on most of these routes? It's not all the routes, we've already made some adjustments to them. But yes, there are gonna be suggestions coming from Kimley Horn of, hey, this isn't our system, but here's what we suggest as professionals. And I think that's gonna be a thing we're gonna have to look at very deeply and try to make the best decision we can for our system. Whether it's changing hours, whether it's how we serve those areas, et cetera. I mean, just on the surface of it, as we look, and we haven't gotten the final report from them on things like the microtransit on-demand feasibility, but you look at some of these things that are so high as far as efficiency, sending a van to pick up those 2,300 people in South Hills instead of driving a vehicle that gets 5 miles per gallon around continuously through the day, starts to make
More
sense.
sense,
Yeah, so there's things we can control and things we can't control here, and the ones we can, ways we can be more efficient with taxpayer funding, we're looking at doing, so.
Well, this is a good segue, because the next item is about the budget. Does anybody have any more questions about this comprehensive analysis that's in the process of being completed? But I mean, that is, it hasn't influenced the 2024 fiscal year budget, but it's gonna influence future year budgets.
I know this sounds real stupid, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a possibility before you make that run, you could send a drone through there and tell if there's anybody at the stop? And that would determine whether or not to send a bus out there.
Yeah.
Because you said there are some days there's nothing.
No, that's not a crazy question, but it's not possible right now, and a lot of those routes that we would need to do that with are too close to the vicinity to the airport, and you're not allowed to send up drones. I do know that from my previous roles there.
I mean, I think you can only you can't send it up 3,000, you can send it up to.
Sure,
There's a
yeah.
limitation.
Yeah, there's limitations on how close to the airport you can get with those also, but as we progress and as we embrace technology, that we hope to find ways to better understand what that service would be, and how much would be necessary.
You're just too progressive, that's probably 20 years in the future.
There you go, we'll hire you, Tom. I've got a drone, I can train you.
Use what you got.
Yeah.
Don't
I
get
do a
it
hot air
confused.
balloon.
I think they run that bus with nobody on it, so it's a great
Yeah.
waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hot air balloon, you put Mr. Tolliver in it. With binoculars.
Goldman and I, we live in South Hill, so we're gonna protect it.
Yeah. So we ready to let Scott give the budget presentation?
Like if it's easier to instead of have all the numbers in front of us, just to go through it. Hey, just go back to the other tab, Travis, if you don't mind, Tyler. This is, again, you all don't care about this, this is what kind of starts it. We got our general ledger, we've got, 100, 200 different accounts and everything, and we match up all these numbers from what we actual are these last couple months, and make the projections, and then after we do that, ideally, most situations, what last year was gonna be similar to what this year is. But there's gonna be some differences, we know, we got new vehicles. Chris has made a good push, we've gotten those new transmissions. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but 1 more mile per gallon times 100,000 on one bus times 20 buses, that's a couple $100,000. We have to keep track of those. But as far as service remains the same, our gallon usage should be about the same. And then we go through the different departments to make sure everybody's got special projects going, just to make sure we're not missing anything. And Sean and I, we sat down, Kurt, we looked at everything. Then we had a couple people on the board here, helped out, Connie and Todd and Jay. We sat down, went through everything kind of painstakingly, line by line, try to summarize it. Now when we get to your point, everything's going to be, hey, Travis, I'm okay. We're good to get to where we need to be now, okay? So we go to the next step. And again, this just condenses everything almost as simple as we can. But you got, this was the budget we had for this current year, 2023. This is what we anticipate everything being, where we have the actual numbers plus these next 2 months kind of guess. The differences there and what we're proposing, for 2024. So, passenger fares, again, last year we were really hesitant, reluctant to increase with the SOAR because there was some uncertainty with that funding. But that grant funding, it's going to be locked in for all of fiscal year 24, probably 25, and hopefully beyond. But we're comfortable now to increase those numbers when we know those are going up. So that's the one area where we're able to do an increase. Charter service, COVID, everything almost went non-existent. We had a little bit of activity this year. We anticipate still being able to do a little bit. It's in the public service, which the communities have various groups that are free. But these are the ones where we are able to charge if we can do some of those. So there's a small number there. Advertising, we're locked into a contract. It's a little lower this year because they were doing an annual amount. Now they're going to be paying monthly, but they're paying whatever the annual fee is divided by the 12. But the contract for this next fiscal year is going to be the $60,000. And then the non-transportation revenue, essentially that's going to be your investment income. And again, last year, we didn't know the investment stuff. The bank had changed some things. And in addition to our meeting the other day with the budget, we were also talking with that group for the finance committee to, we're going to put together that investment proposal. And we're working on it. Lawyers are looking at it to verify everything before we get it sent out. But again, we're going to hit 418, we think, this year, no question. 420 is pretty conservative with it. So revenue-wise, you got a little bit of money coming in. Every little bit helps, but when the expense side is going to be so much more, we need more help there. Operating expenses, this condenses everything. These are the 4 categories. We do our annual reporting to the FDA and TD reports. This is what they look at. So operations is going to include both our regular fixed route and the paratransit or the complimentary service there with them. Maintenance in the garage with everything for both sets of vehicles. Non-vehicle maintenance, a lot of contracts, and we're getting the higher numbers with these where a lot of the IT, you're getting those, what do you call the annual service? Subscriptions with those. And again, this is going to be a count of the year we're in flux because we're changing those softwares, but a lot of them have a lot of capital expenditure, which we plan for in the capital budget. After this year, the capital part will be gone, it's going to be more of an operating cost. So those numbers are probably going to have to go increase next year even more, but this should be pretty close. We listed everything out, all the different subscriptions we have and different services, which you know, it's the way the future is gonna get even more, but, you know, we've got all those accounted for now. And then just regular general administrative buildings and just stuff that can't go anywhere else. But, we budgeted last year 14.7, you know, we're hoping to come in about 14. This year is another tough year for budget purposes. We're in the middle of contract negotiations. It's been 3 years, and we had an extension with it. You know, the average has been about 4%. I think Huntington had settled for. We've got to come up with some number there. You know, they started at 10%. We don't anticipate that being anywhere close, but we've had good negotiations. We're getting close. We've got it. Again, we're looking for a 3-year right now, and again, somewhere hopefully in that range we've got it accounted for. And the other one's fuel. Fuel, we were locked in. We had that's one of our next big costs, 2-year contracts. I know what our fuel cost is going to be through November, but right now we're paying, and again, diesel's the bigger one, but I mean, it's about $2.40, I think.
$2.47 for diesel, $2.31 for gas right now.
That we're paying right now. Market price right now, it was
$3.50 for gas and $3.90 for diesel.
and that's at the market. But again, when we get it from the it's closer to $2.80 in it, the Opus.
Opus $2.60 for diesel and around $2.40 for gas, something like that.
But the other thing is, we kind of took a blended rate, knowing what we have through November. We know how many gallons we should be using. But last year we did this, everything had creeped up just a little bit. Then everything happened in the Ukraine, and I mean those numbers were almost $5. We were locked in, which was great. Huntington didn't lock in. The city only did 1 year. I mean, they were in trouble. They were able to jump in on the state contract. So I mean, that's, anything happens outside the world, it's going to skyrocket like that in just a second. It takes it a while to come back down. Unless anybody can guess what a number is there, I mean, help us out. But again, we had to anticipate a higher number there, like a 350 average, you know, because I mean, we just don't know. I mean, I hope there's enough cushion in there. I hope it doesn't get there, but between now and November, there's just a lot of uncertainty. And you know, depreciation, just what it is. I don't think there's, and the other two big numbers. Additional income we have coming in. We get money from FTA. Typically it was about $2.5 million. It's based on different criteria. There's a certain pool of money they allocated out to all over the country. Bad thing for us, population in our service area is decreasing. Our ridership is decreasing. So I mean, those numbers are going down. There's a less money we're going to be getting. Good or bad, you know, when COVID was here, there was like $7 million, you know, like the year before. They have included an additional $1 million. We have probably, I think, 1 more year after this where that's going to be available. But then you're going back to the 2.5, probably, you know, somewhere between 2 and 2.5, because we aren't hitting those criteria to get that full amount. So, you know, this year, great, at 3.5, but we're not going to have that in another year or two. So just plan ahead. We have to make some other cuts somewhere else. Levy, like we talked about, we're about 2.5% decrease with it. It should be coming in. And again, usually our area, we're behind the times a year or two. So the market nationwide, when everything kind of went down, we kind of looked unaffected, but we slowly went down. So again, we try to keep that flat. And again, when I look at this chart, like cash flow, this is my net income with all these expenses. Depreciation, we've already paid for that capital-wise. So you take it out, we're going to be barely just over break even this year, which isn't a bad thing. Next year, how we've had the budget, take that 2.3 out. I mean, we're $1 million plus going to be in the hole. Yeah, we have money in reserves. Hopefully, fuel doesn't get where it's going to be at, or could be. But years ago, when I was doing the budget, I could always get those numbers to break even. I can't do that now with all these uncertainties. Any questions on this? We'll go here a little more breakdown on this next schedule. That pretty much shows what we're looking at. Alright, Josh, you got it. This just breaks down the expenses a little more. Labor costs. And again, you know, the 5% contract stuff, we'll notice that is a 10%, but last year we were a little reluctant, not knowing what our, what our paratransit, our CAT service was. It had been steady, hadn't been going anywhere, but with the SOAR, we've got the airport, and we've got some other opportunities. It has increased. We didn't budget for it last year as much as we should have. This year we're going to try to hit it what we think it's going to be. So not really a 10% increase in wages there. You're looking at 5-6 additional employees plus, you know, 4 or 5% increase like the other ones have. Another big one, which everybody's probably seen in the paper, hospitalization, PEIA. We're a non-state agency. They've gone back and forth. They finalized it, but it was after they finalized it 3 months earlier. It's going to be a 15% increase for us. I've only got an 8% in there right now because we accounted for a larger increase last year we had anticipated. So as far as what's actually coming in at with the 15% increase, you know, that's the number we're going to have to need to cover it. Can't do much with it. For the employees, if you would take that, what that 15% increase is, because we pay 90% if people don't use tobacco, 95% if they don't use tobacco, 90% if they do. We pay that for single, or parent-child, or family plan. Without any increase in wages to the employees, that healthcare cost alone, it's a 4% increase for family coverage, and over 2% for single. So again, we absorb most of that increase, that cost. But I mean, that's the other big one we knows out there. And who's to say? I mean, I hope, again, they did all that stuff on the state side with their 80-20 and all that stuff to try to get things matched up where they hadn't done it for years. I wouldn't think they're going to keep doing a 10-15% increase. They're probably going to keep those in smaller amounts. But we're a non-state agency. They can treat us differently, and they try to protect the retirees. I mean, we get that. Hopefully, you know, that number can be more like a 5% number, which we usually account for, you know, for the insurances and all. Yeah, like again, workers' comp, we anticipate, you know, like 5%. We don't have those rates or anything. Other fringe, only thing that went down, we'd always budgeted for that larger Christmas party. What we had done this year, scaling it back, it worked. You know, so percentage is huge. Dollar amount really not that big of a difference. Advertising, we didn't hit it this year. We want to be able to keep that. Again, Jake Bone, we alluded to earlier there on the ticket buying, it's education of people. We really need a big campaign this year to show them how this stuff works, how it's going to benefit them. So we'd like to get that stuff out there when those things get in play, you know, in the summer and later. Contract stuff, again, that's where we've got the computer things coming in there, and then other services. We kind of split them up a little bit with some of the computer things, but those are the big ones. Fuel, again, as we talk about, I mean, 33%. I mean, that's huge. But again, hope it doesn't go that high. It could be higher though. We don't know. We got lucky this past time. Tires was one of the good ones. We've if you remember a couple years ago, we switched from buying the tires to be able to leasing them. Buying did give us, you know, flexibility with things, but the cost, I mean, it's nowhere near. It's less than half. I mean, if that. And then we had to buy out a bunch at the end of that initial contract. We're able to reuse those and do some stuff with them. So really, just in this past year is where we've started to have to buy tires in a normal amount. But again, that number is a big decrease, but that's really going to be about what the advantage is of the lease, the cost there. And the material and supplies on the buses, again, we've got 10, 12 new large buses, 10 CAT, 5 of the cutaways. Everything's under warranty this year, but you know, supply chain issues, everything's going up. You know, we're trying to keep it as close as we can to, you know, what it was previous. But utilities, biggest one there, you know, we got the basic increase, but with the new software going in play, we had it on the tablets. It was up in one of these other costs. Now we're doing a direct subscription for all of our utilities for the cell service. That's going to be in the CAT band to give us more flexibility. You can use it on other items in the bus, like say with the cameras, APC counts and all that. So again, that was gonna switch, we've got all that stuff set up. Insurance, and you got 10-15% typically with it. It's got some other things. Dues just has a large increase there. Dollar amount's not huge, but where we joined the Neo Ride, and it's paid off amazing in the RFPs and in the discounts we've gotten. But that subscription fee is going to be what brought that one up. Advertising, again, it's such a small number there. I know it's 80%. Most of the stuff now, we had to separate these. These are when you send out RFPs and everything. Most of that's online and all that now, so those costs are really insignificant. Other expenses is the big one. This is the last year where 6 years ago we agreed to that with the Kanawha County Ambulance, where keeping those percentages the same. We said, hey, we'll buy that ambulance, be able to keep that cost down. So we'll be able to get rid of it this year. That invoice, it came in the mail the other day, so we'll get that taken care of. And then you scroll down, again, those numbers, 10 months actual, 2 months just annualized, and anything we do is a little bit different, came in there. But that's a breakdown pretty much of all the expense stuff. I know it's a lot. Any questions? I mean, jump in if y'all got anything. Otherwise, I'll just keep moving. All right. Next thing is kind of the cash flow. Everything we kind of don't have earmarked set aside is kind of operating. I mean, roughly in the last year, 3.5 million. We got operating revenues this year. Then we got 2.5 coming in. The county just below 8.3, a little whatever. The grant money was 3.5. This was a huge year, but again, it's taken 2-3 years to be able to buy vehicles, which normally would take 6 months or a year. And we had saved that money aside, we had set aside knowing those replacements, what we would need. But I mean, we had 6.6 coming in for capital. So, 24 million was available this year. Operating expenses, regular operations, like a 14 million. Again, we plan on having a little bit of excess on the capital reserve side, so that's a good side, bring that expense down. But then capital expenditures, yeah, we had 6.6 available money in drawdowns, but we still had to pay 9.6. Most of the capital is an 80-20. We did have at the beginning of the year, I think the final payment of some of the stuff there, the city center was in, so we were 100% with it. But we've outlaid 23 million in cash. So we start with 3.5 million, we end with 1.1 million. Not horrible, it's still good. Using everything we budgeted for now, we're looking to next year, starting with that 1.1 million. Operating 2.5, levy the 8.3. We still have capital grant of 3.5, this year. Remember, it's going to be 2.5 or less soon. Not nearly the amount of capital drawdowns. We still have some small projects with it. But then just operating expenses alone, you got 15 million. We know we're going to spend some capital items. A lot of that's going to be local because we had set aside, we had planned for this 2 or 3 years ago with the software for both the fixed route, for the paratransit to be able to do everything with it. And it gives us the capability to be able to do the microtransit part too. But we'll get, all that goes into play this year. And then the TVM machines where they can buy the card, we'll reload them, they will do that stuff online. But again, all that kind of goes into play this year. So that's why we're going to be spending it. And again, we have budgeted for it. So I mean, technically, you could say, but I try not to touch the capital reserve account, try to keep it where it's at. But yeah, we are going to be dipping into it. So you could take this amount out, but you take it out, we went from 1.1 million, you're almost at 0 instead of this negative. And again, we started at 3 million that year. So we're dipping into the reserves. So something's got to give. It's going to be hard for us to imagine to be able to bring in more revenue. So like we talked with the microtransit, and we talked before, make sure everybody's going to be aware, if you can't increase revenue, you're going to have to decrease expenses. So this year we can hopefully get through, but we're making these changes. Because when we done this about 10 years ago with the last planning study and all, the idea was, hey, we know what money we have today. We have to be able to live on that. And we did what was necessary to make that happen. And again, inflation, everything else, everything inches up. We've got to draw all that stuff back in now and start going that way. So that's everything on the operating side. Capital reserve side, we always leave about 100,000 the fueling program. it kind of breaks even and doesn't really help us, but it benefits the county. It's a good thing we do, but the facilities, you know, Marmet and Nitro, and even here, we've got that money aside in case something happens to do upgrades that need to be done. We've got money, again, that we said the 3.5 roughly we use for operating in the grant money we get. We've got about 400,000 available. And instead of getting the big buses, I mean, now's the time to start looking at those smaller vehicles. If you get less people on those, if we're going to be making those types of routes, do we want a vehicle that gets 5 miles to the hour, or do you want to get, you know, a Sienna van, a Sprinter van, or get a hybrid that's going to get 40 miles to the hour? Yeah. So we you know, put in, you know, roughly what a Sprinter and 5 minivans are with federal money, and then hey, let's set some more money aside to be able to get even more vehicles. Again, smaller life, but the smaller vehicles, still it's 5 years. The cutaway buses and then the cat vans, they're still 5 years too. The big buses have about a 10, 12-year life with them. And they're more heavy duty, because we put a lot of burden on the maintenance departments. They do a great job, but there's only so much they can do with, you know, a vehicle that's just designed to last 5 years, as opposed to the larger buses at 10 and 12, when they could do recalls, rebuild an engine, and everything like that. These smaller vehicles aren't designed for that, but where we just had bought 500 for 120, 130,000, cat vans for 110,000, you know, these can be like 40,000. So it's dipping our toes in the water with that. We want to be able to have that money available, even if we don't have the capital stuff, be able to have that stuff set aside, the local money we have to get those if we got the chance. And then again, we know we got 3.5, we got to match it. Operating is 50-50. Service vehicles, same thing. They've been on the road forever. What we've had, only so much we do repairing them. So I'm going to get a couple more of them. Tech stuff, we had a bunch of little small things still, because we've gotten the new server already. It's been taken off. In the software, we haven't spent that money yet for all the plans this year. And then, the big one we talked about, I mean, that facility upgrade. Ideally, as much of it as possible, you know, is going to be with the grant money. Some of those, usually it's 80-20. A lot of that can be 90-10. So we have less we have to have set aside for it, or to match money. To get even more, it'd be great, but it's probably not going to be done in one wave. It's going to be some time to get that funding. So we still want to keep that money. So we have that money shown, we have it available. It helps us in those grants to be able to get them and everything. So we've left that amount, you know, 10% at least on that in there. And doing that, increasing, last year we had the $13,060,000 in the capital reserve, trying to keep it untouched. So we didn't make any asking requests to increase anything in there, but you know, leaving it where it's at, and that helps us to, because we've got it earmarked. You know, it's not like it's just sitting there. Hey, you're sitting on, you know, $10 million. We know what our plans are in the future. We've got the money set aside to be able to do this stuff. So it shows up a little bit different there on the financials. I mean, it helps us keeping that large amount in there.
Scott,
Give me a motion, Bob.
That tech update improvement line, Scott, is that just an error maybe on the calculation at 28 plus 160? 36?
Yes.
Okay, so it should be a little bit 90,000.
Yeah, because some of these were formulas at 80-20 beforehand. Some were the other way. I didn't get that one cleaned up.
Okay.
But the final number, yeah, was the 160 for it. It was, yeah, round the bit, sorry.
Can you go back to the simplified budget? Yeah,
Expenses or the very simplified?
that one right there.
Okay.
So you're showing the net loss.
Scroll down.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. Here.
Yeah, but without depreciation.
You get 2.3, so you're looking at about a 1.5 net loss. And then for this year, we're coming in at, there's a 1.8 loss with depreciation, 2 depreciation, you know, about 200,000-300,000 to the good.
So we'll have a little carryover.
Right, and that was it on that one cash flow. I had brackets on it to show what that little carryover was. And ideally, if you can round the numbers, have that, it'd be great to have carryover. And that's what we've been able to do in the past, when we were fortunate enough to stay under budget, to set that money aside for the capital, for the buses. A big bus costs $500,000. Again, it's worked out well, but we don't have that. I don't have that play this year at all. It was one of those. I asked staffing, operations, maintenance, what they would like. They gave me their, hey, here's the number we want. Sometimes we're able to use that this year. It's like, no, this is what we have right now. We're not going to be able to get those increases like we would love to be able to put in the budget to try to get this thing balanced.
So how do you feel about 2025?
I feel you.
Got 24, yeah. Said that one for you.
Yeah, the general theme, I want to express is that when we talk about our revenues, we realize, okay, safety levy is set through 2029. It's almost, our FTA federal grant funding is a formula grant based off of our ridership and the amount of people here. We know that's going to drop $1 million next year.
At least, yeah.
Those are the money we have essentially to spend here, correct? Our operating costs, fuel, wages, vehicles, parts, insurance, utilities, those go up every single year. If your expenses go up every single year, but the money you make stays the same, you've got a problem. And we only have certain things we can control here as far as what we spend our money on. And that's why, it's tough. That's a tough,
By 2025, we're probably gonna have AI driving buses.
well, we have the money in the capital reserve, but it's tough. I don't, just like when we operate out in our personal lives, I don't want to take from my savings account every time I pay the bills. That's terrifying to me.
Yeah.
So I just ring in the alarm flag that, hey, something's got to give as we move forward.
So what happens in 2025?
So I'll get to make some
Yeah,
tough
that's
decisions.
the idea of 2024. We would hope to begin the microtransit. You try it in the different areas,
Yeah.
and if you're not running constant, 8-hour or hourly service to someone that doesn't need it.
This starts adding up quickly. We did the numbers on what does one large bus, driving our normal service hours for 1 year cost us just in fuel. It was $170,000 a year. We changed that to what would a van that got 20 miles per gallon cost us, and I think it was $4,000 or $5,000 a year. So you start doing that, you start making some of these changes, while to the public increasing the service. Hey, we come pick you up at your house instead of telling you to find your way a couple blocks to a bus stop. And in turn, those savings start adding up. Plus, it's a lot cheaper to work on a smaller vehicle and a lot less complicated.
Yeah, I've never seen a full bus.
Well, they exist. They exist in the
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
They do.
The
And
main
again, back to
lines,
those main lines.
Yeah.
Those
They
main
are,
lines are
especially during
fantastic.
peak. I was saying the same
Yeah.
thing, and on the CAP, I was asking, talking to some of the drivers, and with the short trips and all, he's like, I got a full vehicle, a couple times a day when they're making those
Yeah.
runs. So that is encouraging.
Yeah,
But
Kim Leghorn gave us.
it's the other ones you gotta get rid of that aren't going out.
So we run
Right,
around
that's
2.2 million revenue miles, and we only have 1 million passengers. So if you look at it that way, we're
We run
upside
above-
down completely.
so you
on
need
this.
to cut the bigger buses.
So we went to a conference, Jacob and I did, and that's what you generally do when you introduce yourself. Because I'm with KRT, we run this many routes, we have this many passengers, we run this many revenue miles, and we figured out really, really quick, and we knew this going in there, that we were wildly, outside of that norm. For example, let's look at Huntington, and then I know Cabell County's smaller, I get it. However, they run about 1 million revenue miles and have about 700,000 to 800,000 passengers.
But we're more rural,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Well-
That's like one of the big problems is 900 square miles.
that makes a big
Yes,
difference.
but when we're talking to other agencies kind of like us, right, and we see what they are doing in order to help alleviate that rural portion of their service area, it's going to things like microtransit and cutting down on the big buses where it doesn't make sense to ride on a
That'd
country
save a lot of
road.
money.
Well, I mean, you know, does does a cutaway bus need to go up to South Hills all danger as anyway? If you think about it, right? If you're on a bike and one of our buses passes you on one of those narrow roads, it is like a white knuckle situation for everyone involved.
And you can still get those smaller vehicles to be ADA compliant, which all of them do they need to be? Probably not, but you have to be able to provide that same level of service in terms of weight and everything to have
Well,
that.
see, they have bike racks and everything on them, on the smaller ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have generationally, with the best of intentions, spread out our service to accommodate the citizens of Kanawha County, which we should. And we should continue to have that as our main focus. We can't lose sight of the fact we have to do that efficiently and responsibly with the taxpayers' money. We have to embrace these new ideas to break even.
And we'd actually be increasing service rather than
Yeah, you wouldn't be decreasing the service, you just
at a
need
lesser
to.
cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a different style, and it's honestly easier to use. And I'm not claiming we have it all figured out yet. I don't come to the board saying that. We have a lot of questions we need to figure out on how this works, and it has to be an extremely slow thing to make sure we do it right. And it may not be the golden ticket, but it's one thing we can control. A lot of those numbers that Scott mentions, we don't have any control over. They go
I'll
up.
make your motion to accept the 2024 operating budget.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll
Bob's motion? Okay. Is there any additional discussion?
Could we adjust as capital and the operating and capital, or we have both in there, just to have that flexibility?
So Bob, would you amend it to include
Yes.
both, because the capital is considered a separate budget?
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion about the budget? Now, I think what we see is that it's the starting point of a year of a lot of work, with the COA being completed and lots of public hearings and input from all the stakeholders, the union, the county commission, the various municipalities we represent. Start looking at making some hard decisions to get this to where it's a more operationally efficient machine.
I will say this, and I was gonna bite my tongue, but I'm not gonna bite it, I'm gonna say it. When I first come on the board, I made a statement, I didn't make a motion, that we seem to have not very many passengers on these buses. Could we get smaller buses? And I was informed that the expense was in the driver. And the mileage and all that, it wasn't in the bus. So, see, I was right.
Yeah, I think there's expense in all those items.
Nothing against the drivers, that wasn't a throw at the drivers.
Okay, so I want to call the vote unless there's any other comments on this. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is retention policy.
Yes,
Are we
so-
going to, you're going to present that?
Yeah, so we're gonna table this for this month's meeting. I've been working with Grace and
Well,
her
tell them
team.
what it is.
Yeah, so I'll give you some background on what this is. What we're trying to bring to the board is a retention and destruction policy of the files that KRT keeps. We have done a great, fantastic job of maintaining all the records here at KRT since the beginning of KRT. That has become physically demanding on us and quite unnecessary, just to be honest. And we're going to start converting some of those files to just scan them in and have them and save them that way. But we also want to set up a retention schedule that outlines how many years do you need to keep certain files. We go through the triennial review process, and they ask us about certain, whether it's personnel files, how long do you keep files related to a vehicle that you no longer have, etc. We've hung on to those forever. We don't necessarily need to.
Right.
So we're going to work with Grace and her team to outline, as far as by regulations, what do we need to hold on to, because there may be some state requirements that we hold on to things, because we're kind of in that weird position where we're a quasi-public entity. But we want to do this in order to clean this up and to make sure our employees have a better idea of when they can and cannot get rid of records, and just to be more efficient. And if we get a new facility and we've got literally filing cabinets full of stuff, I would like to, take that opportunity to clean out the things we don't have to keep. And so that's what we're going to be bringing to you very soon. But I wanted to at least put it on the agenda today to talk about the concept.
So there's a little extra work to be done, and there's not going
Yes.
to be a motion necessary today.
Correct.
Lastly, I understand there's a member of the public that'd like to give a up to 5-minute presentation. Aaron, are you still with us? Hey, Aaron.
I'm sorry?
Did you want to say something? I was told by Jacob that you wanted to make a public
Yeah,
comment.
I called, Jacob last week, about a couple of things, and Anthony that works for KRT that does stuff for Jacob had called me back, and was just really helpful. I wanted to share with Mr. Hill and the board. I've had conversations over the phone with Sean, or with Jacob, Mr. Hill, that, anytime I've left a message for him, if he's not been available for whatever reason or out of town, Anthony Smith has called me back. Even this week, there was, issues, that I wanted to talk to Jacob about, and, Anthony was just really helpful, and just, you know, he even told me on the phone that, you know, I brought up, I had explained to Anthony why I called Jacob and left him a message, and, he was just really, really helpful and willing to find out, you know, what he needed to find out for me and let me know what happened and stuff. And I just, you know, I've rode a bus for at least 20 years. I've known Jacob since he's worked here, even before he started doing what he does now and with Cat. But, you know, I tell Jacob all the time, and I want you and the board to know, Mr. Hill, that I really appreciate what you all do here as far as the administrative staff and your drivers even, and your staff, because last week and this week, Anthony has just really been helpful, and just offered to help me in any way. He just, when I say he's offered to help me, Mr. Hill, he told me that he would find out whatever he needed to find out and get back with me and stuff. And it's just, you know, and I knew Anthony when he was a driver because I've rode a bus for so long. And, you know, I wanted to share with the board and with you as the general manager that Anthony's just wonderful. He's a great asset to KRT. He does a wonderful job, for you and for the board or for KRT. I just, you know, and I know that, I had asked Jacob before the meeting if I could say something. I know there's a protocol and I know there's an agenda to follow. I serve on the board, so I know what that's like. I know each thing is different as far as agenda and board stuff, but, I just wanted you and the board to know, Mr. Goldman, that Anthony has just, anytime I've called and left a message for Jacob, he's called me and talked to me and helped me, and it just, he's just been wonderful and great. And I have a lot of great things to say about Anthony when I talked to Jacob yesterday. He's just, because I know that he's been doing stuff to help Jacob, because Jacob's either been out of town or tied up with stuff here, for whatever reason.
You always bring such positive comments, we're glad to have them.
I'm sorry?
Well, you always bring such positive comments, we're happy to hear them.
Well, and you know, I just really appreciate what, I do want Mr. Hill and Jacob to know, and I tell Jacob this all the time, I appreciate all the drivers. And there has been times that I have had issues with drivers because of their attitude or whatever, but that because of new leadership that has changed. I think because of Jacob and Mr. Hill, I think that has changed because I don't really have any more problems with them. But
we appreciate it.
I mean, it just, well, and I've called, you know, and I told Jacob one day, and I want to share this with you all, I said, I really don't like to call you, Jacob, because I know you're busy, but I said, I have an issue with the driver. But it just, I'm glad that, not just Anthony, but I want you all to know that even Jacob, when he's called me, when I've left a message, he's really been helpful and he's been great. I mean, he really has.
Well, good.
But Anthony was just really, really helpful.
Okay.
To
Well,
help Jacob and stuff, and I just wanted you all to know that.
We do appreciate it, and just make sure that Anthony hears the same comments
Absolutely.
from you, so that he gets that positive feedback. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to make a comment, our thoughts and prayers go out to Commissioner Carper. He's having a rough time this morning, surgery, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just pretty grateful stuff going on, so.
Okay.
Just thinking, keeping him in our prayers.
Fantastic supporter of KRT.
Mhm.
Every time we
Yeah,
come to
yeah.
commission, he's been a tremendous help.
Well, I appreciate you pointing that out. Any other items that need to be brought before the board? All right, we'll be adjourned. Thank you all.